Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Adam Balderstone for an episode of Wuxia Weekend. Tonight we're missing two of our co-hosts, so it's just going to be me and Adam, and we're going to do our best to hold down the fort. So hopefully we'll have a good conversation. If not, we'll cut it a little bit short. But either way, we're going to be talking about Chinatown Kid, a 1977 Chang Cheh movie starring Alexander Fu Sheng. For those who don't know, this month our theme is Alexander Fu Sheng. So we're going to be doing all Fu Sheng films for the rest of the month. And this is the first one, I believe. So what was our movie last week, actually, Adam? It wasn't a...
I wasn't here last week, but it was at Last Hurrah for Chivalry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was Last Hurrah for Chivalry, so it definitely wasn't an Alexander Fu Sheng movie. So this is definitely the first one. And this film, before we get into the discussion of it, I do want to mention, we watched the version that's on Amazon, and that is the Celestial Pictures version, which was a remaster from the early 2000s. And it's apparently, normally we don't get into this kind of distinction because usually the remaster issues are fairly minor, or they have to do with the soundtrack, or they have to do with, like, you know, a couple of frames that have been changed or taken out. But this one, there's like a good 20 minutes that's not in the movie, and the ending is different. And I haven't seen the longer edit version. I've only seen this version, but I am aware that there are very strong opinions about the differences between them. And also, it's just a radical. I mean, that's a large amount of time. That's, you know, it's like a this one is substantially shorter. There's an important character that is absent from this version, and the ending is actually different. So our review is based on this version, but it's based on this version knowing that we're watching a sort of potentially very different from the original release, or from the release that people are familiar with. So anyways, Adam, before we get into the plot, just what was your general reaction to this movie?
Well, I wasn't aware before I started watching it that this was a poor cut of the movie with 20 minutes missing, but I could tell. But it's to the movie's credit that even though there were holes in the movie that were kind of apparent to me, it was still a really enjoyable movie all the way through. I thought it was good. It felt similar to Chang Cheh movies like Duel of Fists or The Angry Guest, where it's the typical thing of the characters going overseas to an exotic location and getting into fights with gangster types. Kind of had the same vibe to it in some respects. So if you like either of those movies, I would completely recommend it. But yeah, I liked it a lot, considering that I really, there were a lot of points where things didn't quite hang together because of the missing scenes.
Yeah, no, and I think and for me, the missing scenes, they kind of the impression they created for me was there were certain moments that felt rushed, or like I got like that there were things that were supposed to have happened in a period where they elapsed time, is what it looked like in this edit.
Mostly, yeah. Mostly you could pass. There were a couple of points where I was like, okay, I don't understand why this is happening at all, but I can only think of one of those off the top of my head.
Okay. But yeah, I like the movie. I thought it was reminiscent of Disciples of Shaolin, which I don't know if you were there for the discussion of that. That's the
I have not seen that one.
Were you here for the discussion of the Barefooted Kid by any chance, or were you not here for that one either?
No, that's another one I haven't seen.
Maybe we'll have to. You know what? I know that we don't usually repeat movies, but Disciples of Shaolin is one that we might eventually want to repeat. But basically it's a similar storyline where you have except in that version, and again, maybe the longer edit of this one also goes closer down this path, but I don't think so. But in that one, Alexander Fu Sheng plays a character who's sort of is seduced by the lure of wealth when he moves from the country to the city, and he ends up working for like an evil boss, and becomes like a real sort of, he basically just kind of gets turned to the dark path, and then there's a very emotional sort of climax to the movie. It's an interesting film, and this kind of felt very like it was covering very similar theme where in this case he comes to San Francisco Chinatown and he's and he ends up largely due to circumstance having to work for an evil boss. In this case, though, when he finds out the boss is evil, he starts at least thwarting the really bad stuff that the boss is doing, and then he has to confront the boss and deal with him. And the story is more complicated than that, obviously, because there's two characters here. There's the Alexander Fu Sheng character, and there's the Sun Qian character, Yang Jianwen, who's the student who also comes to San Francisco around the same time. And their paths are kind of almost like contrasts of each other. One of them's a student studying and working in a restaurant, and Alexander Fu Sheng is really just there because he was set up by a gangster in Hong Kong who he got in a fight with over a watch. And the guy
a digital watch.
Yeah, a digital watch. Which again, this is one of these movies that like is really a product of its time in a lot of ways. So everything from the fashion to the digital watch, which is like a real dazzling piece of technology.
Yeah, there's a very narrow window of history where a digital watch is more impressive than a watch with a dial on it. That's that's maybe a period of months where that occurred.
And it's because within 10 years, digital watches quickly become like the Casio type, like plastic watch.
Yeah. Not even 10. Yeah, I can. I bought my first digital watch in 1982, like a rip-off. Not even a Casio, like a no brand, junk watch. So yeah, Casio was more prestigious than I had.
yeah. If I recall, there were some. I remember having some of the. I can't remember the name, but there was a brand of watch that like had like the really loud 80s. Like not neon color, but those bright colors, and they had a line of digital watches, and they were pretty cheap, and that's what I had. But this was like a gold digital watch that really kind of looked sharp, and everybody was dressed in sort of that late 70s fashion. Like this is a very stylish movie. Like everybody looks really, really stylish in this one. The hair, the bell bottoms, the collars on the shirts, the hats, the shoes, everything just kind of is everybody's dressed pretty snazzy.
It's part of what makes the movie enjoyable too. Like I said, a lot of the plot didn't quite hold together because of the gaps in it, but it's just the whole movie, like from the performances and the style, it's just a very enjoyable movie to look at.
And yeah, so and again, the basic story is he comes to San Francisco Chinatown, and he because there's gangsters operating there, he ends up getting into a fight with one of them, and his boss doesn't want any trouble, so he kicks him out of the restaurant, and then he's kind of wandering around, and he has this quasi love interest in the movie. She never quite. Maybe in the unedited version, this is explored more fully. But in this version, it's sort of like it looks like it's going to become like a love interest thing, and then it doesn't really pan out. Or it doesn't go. It doesn't seem to go anywhere. But he meets a woman named Yvonne, played by Jenny Sang, who's Alexander Fu Sheng's real life wife, and she ends up telling him that. There's some guy who wants to hire him, and the guy is this white dragon Pai Lung, played by Philip Kwok, and this is kind of like it's kind of interesting to see Philip Kwok in this type of role. He's sort of like an evil boss, but he has like a real charming sort of. He's one of these bosses that like makes a really winning first impression on you, but then when you cross him, he's ruthless. So he ends up working for this guy, and then he becomes like an important soldier in the guy's retinue, and very quickly you see him go from walking around in just like plain white t-shirts to walking around in these really really nice, and again the style is actually part of the story. It's not something where it's just stylish because of the era that it was in. It's an important part of how you see the character go from being really low in the world to becoming a success, And so when Alexander Fu Sheng's character Tang Dong first meets that gangster in Hong Kong, the guy's got the digital watch and the really stylish clothing, and Tang Dong doesn't have any of that. And by the end of the movie, he's dressed in very similar clothing. He's got a cigarette with a really, like a little cigarette holder on it, and he's just kind of walking around like he's the man. And so, but when he discovers that his boss is selling drugs, and that the Sun Qian character Yang Jianwen, who's it's kind of an awkward plot, but and I mean we could do a whole episode on how Cheng Che and his understanding of how drug use works is a little bit odd, but the Yang Jian character, he because he wants to do well in school, but he's also working this job where he's not sleeping much, and one of the cooks there he learns is selling cocaine. He decides to buy some cocaine and apparently shoot it. They don't ever say it's cocaine. It's either cocaine or some kind of amphetamine. But his first foray into the drug world is apparently going to be shooting it right into his vein, and Tang Dong catches him just as he's about to do this, and that's the thing that sort of catapults him into a conflict with his boss, because he sort of sees it. The Yang Jianwen character obviously represents something to him that he wants to preserve, and so he ends up saving him from drugs by paying a lot of his expenses anonymously, and telling the boss to go easy on him, and then going around and breaking the legs of anybody who dares to sell drugs in Chinatown. And so when Philip Kwok, the White Dragon Pai Lung, finds out about this, at first he sort of exploits it and gets Tang Dong's help to by telling him, look, I'm not selling drugs, but you want to know who is? The Green Tiger Club. They're selling drugs. And the Green Tiger Club is really just his rival. So he goes with Tang Dong, and they wipe out the Green Tiger Club. And the leader of the Green Tigers is played by Lo Meng. And so we get a lot of the Venoms here. This is sort of an early movie where you get to see the people who become the Venom mob. But after that, then he has to deal with Tang Dong, because he's getting rid of his drug dealers. So he sets him up, and he tries to get him arrested, and he escapes, and he ends up going to White Dragon headquarters, trashing the place, and White Dragon takes Yang Jianwen as a hostage, and then there's a big confrontation at the headquarters. And in the version that we saw, which is the different edit, the ending, which is kind of odd, but I thought kind of interesting, even though it sounds like the other ending is a much more traditional Cheng Che type ending. In this one, basically all of the bad guys and Tang Dong are arrested, and Yang Jianwen is able to go on and transfer to Harvard and become a success. So there might be some details I missed that you want to point out, but I think that's basically the main thrust of the story, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting setup in that Yang can't, that he's got the potential to go on because he is legitimately there as a student, on a proper visa. He's actually got a future, whereas Tang Dong, it's like no matter how well he does, he's not legitimately there. And I mean, he even in Hong Kong, it's like he was like a mainlander who snuck over to Hong Kong. He didn't even have a legitimate job in Hong Kong. It's like he's kind of perpetually stuck in the shadows of the world, and so it's like really important for him to help Yang out and give him a lift, give him that chance, because he can have the proper life that Tang Dong. Like I said, I felt like in this edit the movie didn't quite land that emotionally as well as it could have. I feel like there's probably a version where it all comes together better, but it's still I still got the point across.
Well, here's the thing that struck me about the breakdowns I saw from people of the other version, which I haven't seen and Adam hasn't seen. but but everybody that or a lot of the ones that I read said that the pacing was really well done, and so I think that tells you a lot. If the pacing was really well done in that edit, then my suspicion is that, so. But either way, I think it was still, I got the point. Like, I still got what they were going for. But like I said, some of it felt a little bit rushed, and I think a lot of it probably did have to do with the edit. But the fight scenes were very entertaining. The characters were all pretty entertaining, and I thought that the overall storyline worked. Like you said, like, he's this guy who he really can't. He's kind of screwed wherever he is, because he's clearly. We don't know why he went to Hong Kong, but I get the feeling that he can't go back to the mainland for whatever reason. He's in Hong Kong illegally, and then when he's there, he ends up being wanted for drugs, and so then he comes to San Francisco illegally. And this is like an ever-present thing. Like, anytime he runs into an issue, people can kind of lord that over him and say, "Look, you're here illegally. We can just call the authorities." And there's also this interesting aspect to it where, when they're in the American Chinatown, that's one of the things that a lot of the gangsters can hold over you. It's one of the things that can give the gangsters their powers. They can. Well,
even the restaurant owner, it's like he's just using them. It's like he in a lot of these movies, you kind of have the restaurant owner being squeezed by the mob, and it's like he's a sympathetic character. And this one, it's like he's kind of part of the same machine. He's just this different cog in the machine that's taking advantage of immigrants, basically.
And even though this is set in San Francisco, which I thought was a cool location to set the movie, it doesn't look like it was filmed in San Francisco to me. It looks like they did a lot of exterior shots, and
they did. Yeah, I think they did have some shots with Tang Dong that looked like they were in San Francisco, like a couple, like maybe they'd gone there for 2 hours.
Yeah,
done a couple of like illegal street shooting shots, and then like ran back to do the rest on sets. But because
even the cars when they were driving in San Francisco were on the wrong side of the road, and the wheels were on the wrong side of the car. So I mean, you just so and also
on the.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll say, just going back, the whole Tang Dong thing, you said you don't think you can go back to mainland China either, is that maybe he could, but we are talking the 70s, and it's like, mainland, China has changed a lot over the decades. It's like, I can see you just under no circumstances wanting to go back there no matter what. It was a different situation back then.
That's true. And but either way, you get this sense that he's just in like this really chaotic state that he can't, that's very much the opposite of the Yang character who has a clear goal and path in life, and his only real. And again, but even he is sort of skirting the law, because when he goes to America, his situation is his father doesn't have a lot of money. And so his father agrees to let him go because he says he'll wait tables when he goes there and he'll get a scholarship. And so he gets a scholarship and he goes to wait tables, but he's a student, so he's not supposed to. And this is something that's true. Like I know this from working in restaurants and stuff like this. Like, if you're on a student visa, you're not supposed to be waiting tables. That's like illegal. And so, you could get in trouble for that. So like you said, like the restaurant owner can hold that over them. The gangsters can hold that over them. In fact, the Lo Meng character does try to hold it over the student. He says, you're not supposed to be working here, so why don't you join my my Green Tiger Club? It's some kind of martial arts organization. $50 a month. And the guy's like, well, but I only make $80 a month. How will I survive? And he's like, well, you're just gonna have to pay me. And then that's when the Alexander Fu Sheng character steps in and tries to stop things, but which is what leads to him getting kicked out of the restaurant. And then those two end up having a conflict with each other. And but I did want to go back to the drug use, because I was a little bit I don't know, like I don't know if you were here for the Heaven and Hell podcast. Were you?
That one I was in on, yes.
So I felt very similar to the way drug use was handled there, where Yang is just his first foray and he's going to shoot up some kind of amphetamine, and And
Yeah, it's like start with
it's
trucker caffeine pills or
yeah.
something. Work your way up.
It's just like it just seemed like a really hardcore study drug for somebody's first venture into the yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I thought the same thing. I was
Um,
like, wow.
but yeah, and also again, like I said, this movie did remind me of Disciples of Shaolin. Now, in Disciples of Shaolin, the big thing that the character wanted was, and the reason why I drew the parallel was Alexander Fu Sheng's character, that the big thing that he wants at first is new shoes, because he's got these old shoes, and it felt really similar to how he was acting about the watch with the Johnny Wang Lung Wei character Zhu Hao, who had the golden watch.
Yeah.
And so, but I don't know. What about the? There were some other interesting things in this movie. The orange juice thing was kind of interesting to me, where his character, like he again, even when he's in Hong Kong, he doesn't really have many options. And he has to become an illegal hawker, and he discovers that the locals like fresh squeezed orange juice, and he's been doing kung fu for 10 years, so. His big idea is, well, we can circumvent the juice squeezing machine, and I can just use my fists and squeeze the oranges into the glass, and so that's what he does, and it looks like a pretty successful little business venture that they start, and that's what attracts the attention of the Zhu Hao gangster, who he ends up getting in a fight with, and.
Yeah, I found that kind of entertaining because it's a typical thing in these movies where a character will pick up that another a character is good at kung fu base or something. It's like, oh, I can see from your orange squeezing technique that you've studied martial arts for 10 years, and it's like it's just kind of funny.
But you know what's fun? You know what I find interesting about that? I think that's actually true. When I think that you can like, I can usually tell when people have some kind of training like that.
Oh yeah, I agree. But it just as it being an orange squeezing thing, which once again would be hard. Squeezing oranges all day sounds. When all those people were rushing to the stand, I was like, oh my god, that seems like torture having to squeeze oranges for all these people.
My concern was really the hygiene. Like, I know this is the 70s, and maybe people were less squeamish about germs than we are today. But like, he was not washing his hands, as far as I could tell. And he was handling money, and his hands were getting on the glass and the juice, and it just seemed like a not very hygienic situation for your morning juice.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I used to work in a juice bar actually, like years ago, and it's like, but the thing you'd hate, it's like people would want like carrot juice or something like that, or wheatgrass. That was fine, but the thing that was always the biggest pain to do was orange juice. It's like anytime someone would like to come in that would order orange juice, you'd always try to not be the person serving that person. So I just having that as a business model, I'm like, oh, the worst juice of all to have to work with. Can't it be apple juice?
Now why was the orange juice the worst to work with?
It takes the longest. I mean, it's like if you're juicing apples or carrots or anything like that, you drop it in a juicer, it's just like, the whole fruit or vegetable goes in there. It comes out instantly. You're done. You serve it up. But it's like with oranges, you have to cut the oranges. You need a little spinner thing. You press it down against, and you have to get all the juice out of there. It just I don't know. It's yeah, it's there's a reason that there's very few restaurants that serve fresh squeezed orange juice.
Okay.
I'll say that.
Okay. Fresh squeezed orange juice is good, though. I can see the appeal.
Delicious. Oh yeah, without a doubt. I had some when I was visiting you in Boston. Was the last time I had it. But,
okay. Where in Boston did you get the fresh squeezed orange juice?
It was somewhere in Malden. It was it was a place we went to for brunch. I don't know.
Okay. But another food thing that came up too was the hot dogs, which I kind of thought was a nice touch. I think these little, like the hot dog, somehow, I don't know why, but that just really endeared his character to me. This enthusiasm he had for the hot dog, this like very simple, basic food that he just adored, was I don't know. It was a charming quality for the character to have.
Yeah. I mean, it's like it's a really good performance he gives in this movie. I have to say, just through the whole arc of the character. I think he did a great job in this.
Well, one of the things that I like about Alexander Fu Sheng, and I really kind of realized it watching this movie and thinking about Disciples of Shaolin, is how, in other movies too, now that I really think about it, he's very good at weaving that line from good to bad, because he's got this impish quality to him that can really sort of exist on either side of that line. It can be a villainous thing, or it can be sort of a playful, innocent type thing. And so he can come into the movie as sort of this very innocent character, and then become corrupted by the end. And they didn't. And again, in the edit we saw, I don't know how deep they go in the other edit. In this edit, they don't go too deep with the villainy with him. He kind of gets in there, and then he sort of starts becoming a force for good by going against the boss. But there is that scene when he goes back to the laundromat, and he has a little bit of a confrontation with Yvonne's father, but there's a look in his eyes when he's going down the stairs where you feel like he's becoming the leering sort of thug that he, remember the two guys that he got in the fight with in the laundromat before. He kind of became a lot like those, and you got the impression that, if she was there, maybe he was going to kind of pester her like they like they did.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit, when he was going down the stairs, I was wondering, wow, is he there to collect money now? It felt like that. I mean, another scene too where, going all the way back to near the beginning of the movie, when he gets into the fight with Zhu Hao over the watch, where Zhu Hao says, if you can beat me, you could have the watch. It's like, he really beats up Zhu Hao bad. I mean, after the guy is beaten, he's like kicking him on the ground. So I'm like, God, what do you? It's like this is just a contest, and you're really taking that guy down.
I saw a breakdown online of the difference between the two edits. I'll try to post a link to it in the description, because there's a website, I can't remember the name, but there's a guy who went through the trouble of contrasting the different versions, and apparently in that scene, Zhu Hao pulls out a knife at some point. And it's not in this version that we have. So that would clearly explain the ferocity. But
I was just like, wow, Tang Dog, what are you doing here? You really want that watch? You gonna kill that guy?
Well, and the other thing that we're deprived of is the Teresa Ha Ping character, the woman in the car with him. Apparently, in the other version, she sends Alexander Fu Sheng on a mission to go rescue a woman, and that woman is Kara Hui, who's so there's a whole subplot that is added.
I'd forgotten about the woman in the car, but the camera kind of lingered her at some point, like she was an important person, and it's like, then she never does anything. So that's interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's the what is it? That's the Teresa Ha Ping she's one of my favorite actresses, even though she usually has very small roles. But when she, but if she's in, but she really is good at making memorable characters in these kinds of movies. And she's the woman who played Devil Grandma, for instance, in Magic Blade. She really can. She's sort of like a Vincent Price type. Like, she can really play these wicked, evil characters. And even when she's playing somebody a little bit more reserved, like the one in this, you kind of know she's somebody. Like, you just get this.
She felt like, just the scene where they're sitting in the car doing nothing really other than looking at people and stuff. I felt like, ooh, this is a character that's going to do something later in the movie. They're setting something up. And she had that vibe to her.
One of these days, I think what we should do is we should do a Teresa Ha Ping episode just devoted to we'll just focus on her roles in different movies, because she's really a very special actress. I think she has she's a great character actor. And again, we got a glimpse of it here, but in the edit we were watching, it doesn't go that far. But I thought the same thing when I was watching it too, because I was like, wow, that's like a real extreme reaction to what was essentially like an agreed upon fist fight that was. You didn't get the sense that it was supposed to go to the extent that it did. But the end result of the fight is that the watch is damaged, and and he gets upset that he feels he's been deceived, and then that's what ultimately leads him to get into the conflict with the guy, and then he plants the evidence on him, and he has to flee. But yeah, I do think though that he really is just very skillful at this at being that kind of a character where he evolves into something much more dark. You really see it in Disciples of Shaolin, which is why I think at some point we might want to do a revisit of that. But we'll have to see. That's we'll have to talk to Lady Chow Fung and see if she's agreeable to revisiting Disciples of Shaolin.
Yeah, no, I'd be up for that. But yeah, I mean, this. I mean, like I said, even I'd recommend this even if you can only get this cut of the movie, because it's still just a really solid Alexander Fu Sheng movie, and it's but yeah, I don't know, what was your overall impression of it?
Of the movie in general?
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed the movie. I think that I again, like you, I thought that some of the scenes felt a little bit quirky, and I think that comes largely down to the edit based on what I've read. But even with that stuff, I had a fun time. Again, I'm going by this edit, not the the longer edit, which I might have a different opinion of. But I personally enjoyed Disciples of Shaolin more than this one. I thought that was a somewhat better treatment of a similar type of story. But this is still very entertaining, and I think this does kind of stand out for a number of things. Like a lot of Chang Cheh movies have stylish aspects to them, vengeance and the Angry Guest movie, things like that.
Yes.
But this was one where I felt like the stylishness really paired well with the story in a way that just was very smooth. And also, I thought that the style was really, I don't know, it just felt like he really nailed it here. I feel like he's always kind of been dabbling in getting that kind of style down, and here it just really reaches a crescendo. That's a pleasure to watch. And the other thing that stands out about it is you have a lot of the Venoms in it. So you have Philip Kwok, you have Lo Meng, and you have Sun Qian in there, and it's just it's a really great mix of actors. And so when the fight scenes do hit, they're solid. You have very solid performances. And also there were some interesting things going on here with some of the female characters. Again, Chang Cheh, he does tend to use females more as love interests or as arm candy in a lot of his films. But like what was the name of the character? Was it Lena? The Shirley Yu character, the daughter of the restaurant owner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've forgotten her name.
I think it was Lena. But the daughter of Chen, the guy who owns the restaurant. There was something just I don't know how to describe that character, but there was just something very I don't know. There was something very colorful about her personality in that. She wasn't. It wasn't like it was. She didn't have a lot of screen time, but I felt like she was supposed to be like maybe an Americanized character, like a character who would.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I know there was like a scene where she was calling the father daddy, and it was kind of but there was like a, I don't know, kind of a. It didn't seem very respectful the way she was doing it. Do you know what I mean? It seemed like she was kind of like snapping her fingers and like I'm going dancing, and then it turns out that she's dating like the big crime boss in town. But just the way she carried herself, I thought it was
there's explicitly the scene where they're threatening to burn the restaurant down, and she's there, and her father kind of looks at her. She just kind of shrugs like whatever, I don't care, I'm fine. And although I have to say, during that scene, my one question of, is it a good idea to store a large canister of gasoline in a kitchen?
Probably not.
Is that really maybe? Well, it was like you say, it was the 70s. Maybe it was normal back then, but
I mean, I mean, I remember even in the 80s we were much more careless about things. So, but I think that and she does eventually say to him, like, look, leave my dad alone and we'll just go to your place. We have this guy, we can take him there. So, you know, she does help her dad, but she barely lifts a finger to do it. You know, and you get the impression she might still be dating this guy even if he murders her father, is sort of the impression you're left with in the scene.
Yeah, that's exactly. She kind of tries to help him out, but she's not going to really put herself out there. But yeah, it's. I mean, it is. I mean, that is a whole interesting angle of it. The whole immigrants to America kind of angle of the movie is something the movie definitely has going for it.
Yeah, and I thought it. I mean, it definitely seemed to be going in that direction with a lot of the stuff, and again, even down to like the situation they're in where they're sleeping above the kitchen and they have like the really low ceiling, and again, I do like sort of the visual motif of Tang Dong always testing and punching the ceiling. Like he does this many times in the movie, and it sort of helps to emphasize his ambition in life and his desire to escape from his situation and become a you know, by whatever means he needs to become a big man. But right down to that whole situation where they're all sort of sleeping in really close quarters, it just really, you know, it feels like an immigrant story, and I think that it's I think that adds something to the movie. You know, there's like a lot of movies kind of leap to mind when you know, sort of like you know, everything from like, you know, like The Godfather 2 to Scarface, just movies where you have that sort of you know, somebody coming here for to try to get a better life. But yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know, but I think it's you know, it definitely sort of, you know, works well with that immigrant storyline there. But yeah, I don't know. And I suppose, you know, another thing that leapt to mind that I did want to talk about, it's a minor point, but it was kind of annoying me. And maybe in the edited the better edit, this isn't as much of an issue because they can go deeper into that story. But the Zhu Hao character, I didn't quite get his motivation, because it seemed like initially he was clearly trying to recruit Alexander Fu Sheng. He was clearly you know, that was his aim, and he gets wrapped up in this issue about the watch instead, and allows that to become a rift between them, and he just ends up losing a potentially very valuable soldier with 10 years of kung fu training. So it seems like all wasted effort on his part that amounts to nothing.
Yeah, it seemed a weird. The whole thing seemed weird. Like, you know, I mean, for one thing, too, realizing, wow, this guy's a really good fighter, and I want this fighter on my side. Is, hey, if you know, let's fight, and you'll see if you can beat me. I mean, it just seemed a weird. You know, whereas later on, when the other guy tries to recruit him, he just recruits him to beat up other people for him. He doesn't. He recruits him because he's pretty sure the guy can beat him up. So I don't know. Yeah, that didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it was. Again, I suspect that the edit might have something to do with it. But I feel like it's just like his character lost sight of what he was trying to do, is how it looked in the version that we saw, to me.
Yeah.
But again, I guess maybe what we were supposed to assume is that his ego got in the way or something. I don't know. But and also, again, because there is that whole subplot, and he's still kind of working with that woman, you know, who knows? So, you know, it works, but it was a little bit quirky, and so I think that I would definitely like to get my hands on the other version. I think that would. I don't know how easy that's going to be. I was looking around and I was having trouble, but I think I think at some point if we could get our hands on the other version of it and do a second discussion, I think that would be pretty interesting, because I would love to compare this. When I was reading about the differences between them, I was deeply intrigued by how different they were. And I mean, I've definitely seen movies that are different, but this one seemed particularly, if everything I was encountering is true, to be particularly different.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a slightly different soundtrack is one thing. A different ending is another thing entirely. So I'm quite intrigued here. And I know that there are often very different edits of movies that sort of get, they'll make a movie and then in one country it might get played one way, in another country, it's, but I don't know. From what I was able to gather online, people seem to prefer the other edit. But yeah, so I don't know. Any other thoughts on the film before we decide to head out?
Let's see. I think I've exhausted most of my thoughts on the movie at the moment, but yeah, I mean, I once again, I'd be very happy to review the full version if we can get our hands on it, because I liked the movie. Like I said, the fact I liked it so much, despite it clearly being kind of a damaged edit, because that just says a lot about it.
Yeah, I think it had a lot of really great ingredients, and it just didn't feel like it had enough time to breathe in the version that we saw. That was sort of my feeling, and I was kind of filling in the gaps with everything I knew about Chang Che and Alexander.
Yeah,
it's sort of like I was like, well, I know what this is supposed to be, but it just felt. I just thought it was rushed pacing. I didn't even make the connection until I was reading about the big differences. But I think that it's, I don't know, it's funny. There was a I was watching a YouTube video. There's a YouTube channel called Kung Fu Critic, what I watch sometimes, and he was asking the question about remasters of martial arts movies and how people feel about them. And sometimes they're good, sometimes you get a much crisper, cleaner version of a film, and that like there's a night and day watching a clean version of Come Drink With Me versus like a weirdly cropped VHS version. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't see the skill of the filmmaking in the weirdly cropped aspect ratio. But on the other hand, sometimes they tinker with things, and that can or maybe they're not even trying to tinker with things. Sometimes they can only get their hands on certain prints of it, or it's not necessarily because they're trying to damage the end product. But I think it's always one of those things where it's good to know. I wish when they did remaster them that there was more information available on the remastered version about the remastering process, because I feel like that. I recently got a version of Touch of Zen that was the remaster was overseen by the lead actress from the movie. Zhu Feng was very involved in the whole process of remastering it, and as a viewer, when that made me feel like I was in very good hands. Do you know what I mean? Like, I got the DVD and the Blu-ray, and there was a whole booklet in there on the that got into the process. Do you know what I mean? And I just wish that, I think that they should do more of that, because I think what we're talking about here is film preservation, and it's one of those, like, what's the famous, I'm not very familiar with art and art history, but I know that there have been some really notorious efforts where people have tried to preserve a painting and totally destroyed it.
Yeah, I'll say a remastering isn't a neutral process. You can't. It's not like you just push a button and a machine remasters it. You have to make creative choices in remastering something, and color choices, and I mean, yeah, it is possible to make a movie worse
and
through
that
remastering.
And that was the thing that was clear to me when I was watching A Touch of Zen, because my Touch of Zen movies, they've always been pretty grainy, the versions that I've had. And then this one came out, and I finally had one that was like in really stark color. But they clearly had to add those colors in. They had to go in there and like almost like it was almost like a Technicolor type situation. And the thing that I liked about knowing that Zhu Feng was involved in it, not that she was personally doing that, but that she was, I forget if she was funding it or what, but she was actively sort of, participating. And I think that knowing that they had somebody who was on the set, who acted in the movie, helping in some way to at least give input on those kinds of decisions, was it just made me feel as a viewer like, okay, they're probably at least like that, because otherwise you don't know what color red King Hu wanted. You just, and so I think I think this is maybe a case of a movie like that where there's a discussion to be had on the remastering process and the impact that can have on a movie. In the end, we both still enjoyed this movie, but we don't really have the knowledge of the previous version and so we don't know what the gap is between this version and that version in terms of quality. So and I don't know, maybe this version, because it is a remastered version, so it's still going to be. It's probably crisper. It's probably got a better aspect ratio, but you do wonder about what parts of the story you're missing and the rest.
Yeah, it was very. It looked like a good version of the movie as far as the picture quality and everything. I didn't find any faults in that regard at all. It was so. But they did something right.
But one thing I will say is, even though I know there's a different ending in the other one, and I usually am a big fan of Chang-Chi's sort of gristly, cathartic endings that he always has, the fact that this one wasn't that was a surprise, and that kind of worked for me. Like I was like, oh, okay, so, I guess everybody goes to jail, and Sun Jian goes on to be a dutiful son, and it's kind of an interesting sort of mellow ending to it. Where and again, from what I was reading, it sounds like the other version is much more grisly, and we get a lot more tragedy mixed in with the end there. But but this was still kind of interesting. I did think it was weird that the Yang character was just able to walk away from the police after that. That was a little bit odd.
That bothered me at first, but then I thought about it, and I'm like, well, why were the police there? And I thought maybe the police were there because the restaurant owner or someone at the restaurant called the police, because that guy had been kidnapped.
That's true.
It's like if someone had reported that crime at the restaurant, he would have been the victim that the police were rescuing. So it does kind of make sense.
But I don't know. This again, the name of the movie is Chinatown Kid, and it's available on Amazon Prime, and I think it's worth checking out. I personally, between this and Disciples of Shaolin, I would watch Disciples of Shaolin and then maybe watch this. I think that's a slightly I think it just gets into for me, it got into the subject matter a little bit better. But I had a good time watching it, and I think the very modern setting, was kind of cool. I thought that the costumes were good. Again, if you like the Venom Mob, you're going to be happy seeing a lot of the stuff here, and you get to see the Venom Mob in a performance that you're not really as accustomed to seeing them in too. So there's that as well. But yeah, so I don't know. Next week we're going to be continuing with our Alexander Fu Sheng Month, and so I believe we're doing Deadly Breaking Sword next week, which I don't believe I've seen. I'm not sure. I always confuse it with another film, and so I believe this might be a new view for me, which is good, because oftentimes with these films I've already seen them when we talk about them. Then we're gonna on the 24th we're still sort of having our vote on whether we're going to do 5 Shaolin Masters or Boxer Rebellion, and then we're going to close the month with 8 Diagram Pole Fighter. So I think we have a nice lineup of films, and we also do have a lot of other Alexander Fu Sheng movies that we've talked about on the podcast before. So anyways, we will let everybody go, and we will be back on later.